Good morning. How do we feel about a fight scene, Mennonites? I did consider, if were you all my high schoolers, I would have a lucha libre mask on, I think. It's a wrestling scene today in the story of Jacob. And 2 weeks ago, Janine Yoder led us through the story of Jacob's escape from his father's home and his encounters in the wilderness, and she did it through this excellent psychoanalytical lens of fight and flight. So if we remember 2 weeks ago, the flight into the wilderness, it's time for Jacob to fight. And that's where we get our WWE SmackDown in the wilderness. I teach English Lit at Edison High School, and in that class, it's College Board standards that we have to teach the kids to identify archetypes. We have a list of archetypal literary figures, and they have to be able to know that such and such is such archetype, and so is this one. It's part of the Western canon, so to say, and it's at this Jungian attempt to homogenize all human stories under a series of archetypes. Jacob is read as a trickster archetype, the trickster hero, which is convenient that the Odyssey's in theaters because he's one of the great ones. Odysseus is the one who wins by being smart and by fooling his enemies, though I hear the Christopher Nolan Odysseus, which I've not seen, is pretty gloomy. They're supposed to be tricksy and cunning and clever. There's Prometheus, who swindled the gods out of fire and then gets his liver pecked out for eternity in punishment. And there's Anansi the spider from the Akan religions of Ghana, who became Brer Rabbit in the U.S. South. It's a really popular archetype because the trickster is the charming rogue. They're the lovable anti-hero. They're weaker but smarter, and they win by cunning. And it's not really their virtue. It's not because they're a good person, and it's not because they're strong, and it's not because they're powerful that they win. They win because they're really clever and smart. So they're sort of these very compelling figures in world mythology because they're, anti-heroes. They're not super admirable, but they win nonetheless. And there's another archetype, which I debated putting photos of, but decided not to, which is from wrestling specifically, and from WWE, which is a world I'm not familiar with, but it is the wrestling heel. And in America, we like to make the wrestling heel one of our geopolitical foes. So you have the Cold War Russian wrestling heel who gets beat up by the strong American or whatever, and then even worse and more brutal ethnic stereotypes of the heel. And it works as wordplay with Jacob's name, right, which is heel grabber. He comes out as a twin, grabbing Esau's heel. And it's true that that's what Jacob is like. He's been on a crime spree through most of Genesis here. He's stealing the blessing from his brother. He's fleeing from his ancestral home in the wilderness, knowing that his brother's kind of rightfully angry at him and looking for him. He meets up with his father-in-law Laban and then slowly, schemingly, is stealing away his flock, accumulating his own wealth, getting tricked back and getting some wives and having all these sorts of dramas. And by the time we're spending so many chapters with Jacob, we're wondering why we're with this jerk who's just getting away with crime after crime after crime after crime and seems to kind of be winning for it. He just, steals some stuff, flees, steals some stuff, flees, and flight mode is working really, really well for him when he's coming into confrontation. By time we get here, though, to the wrestle, his past is catching up with him. We can hear the cop sirens in the distance. They're closing in. His father-in-law is starting to trick him back. They've all kind of entered this dynamic of trick, be tricked, trick, be tricked. And he's being pursued. It's like a chase scene. Jacob's with his family, his household, out in the wilderness, and he's finally being confronted by his father-in-law. And it's there that the schema for conflict resolution that Jacob's been relying on, which is run away, is not able to serve him. There's only one option left to him, and that's you've got to confront it. It's here. A messenger arrives saying Esau is coming too. He's got 400 men with him. And so the sense is that Jacob's caught in this pincher maneuver, and he's going to be caught. It's then when, there's nothing left to do, no more places to run, that the wrestling scene happens. And it's a very surreal, sort of strange, magical scene, as you heard read earlier. Everything happens very quickly. There's not a lot of explanation, and it's a kind of language, right, where we have a lot of debate. As Audrey said to the children, right, it's been called the wrestle with God. It's been called the wrestle with an angel. The text says it's only a man because it's from, what I would make the kids call a third-person limited point of view, which is where we are from Jacob's perspective, and that's what he's seeing, just a man there in the wilderness. It's obviously something else, because there's magic rules going on about the sunlight can't touch him and learning names and yada, yada, yada. But there's a real sense of mystery and portent in this moment. Traditions long held that it was like an angel, some kind of messenger. There's an identification of it as an angel in Hosea when they're referring to this story. The Jewish scholar Nahum Sarna said it was like a tutelary spirit, which is a very world religious analytical lens. It's a connection of Esau as guardian angel. And so through a sort of protecting spirit, it's revenge being wreaked on Jacob. And Jacob later says, I who have struggled with God and men. And that makes some people view this being as God's self. I'm not particularly persuaded by that with the rule about sunlight and the fact that Jacob wins. To me, makes it hard to square the idea that this is God. But I am really fond of Robert Alter's reading, and it's a very literary one, which reflects my job. But it's a reading of the foe as this psychological and narrative manifestation of Jacob's past as a trickster and a cheat. Jung would call it the shadow with a capital S. It's the side of the self, the side of the psyche that is out of line with our idealized self, the desired self. It's the part of us that we suppress or we struggle with or we feel guilt about or we run away from. And I just want to read from Alter's commentary in his translation of Genesis, where I think he puts it in a really, really interesting way. He says, the real point, as Jacob's adversary himself suggests when he refuses to reveal his name, is that he resists identification. Appearing to Jacob in the dark of the night, before the morning when Esau will be reconciled with Jacob, he's the embodiment of portentous antagonism in Jacob's dark night of the soul. He's obviously, in some sense, a doubling of Esau as adversary, but he's also a doubling of all with whom Jacob has had to contend, and he may equally well be an externalization of all that Jacob has to wrestle within himself. In this reading, it's easy to see how Jacob's confrontation here is a culminating or tipping point moment in his story. His MO at this point has been commit crime, commit fraud, do identity theft, whatever, and then flee. And it's for his physical safety, because some of these folks, right, we know Esau is a fighter and an attacker. But it's like a way to create psychological and spiritual safety for him too, right? With his father behind him, with his brother behind him, off in the wilderness with his own household. He has no reminders of his failings. He has there's nothing forcing him to confront it. With his father-in-law behind him, he can enjoy his wealth. He can not need to be reminded of at whose expense that wealth was accumulated. And when he wrestles his shadow, the defining phrase is that it's face to face. The place name gets its name from the fact that there Jacob sees face to face. And for whatever reason, because he's matured at this point, or because he's just desperate and realized there's no other option, because he's tired of running, Jacob, here in the wilderness alone, does not see a man in the shadows and do what I would do, which is run away, but instead they just go at it. They fight. Jungian would say we might consider the lesson of this for ourselves, right? Psychoanalytically, individually, and personally. From what part of our individual shadows might we be hiding? Might we need to turn around and face or even fight? What do we avoid taking accountability for or confront in ourselves that might be worthy of a wrestling match? And for this, echoing Janine 2 weeks ago, notice the conditions in which Jacob is finally able to stop running and to wrestle. He's in the wilderness, his family sent away from him, a time alone and a time in the wild place, the dark night of the soul. And he meets his shadow alone in the night. Janine spoke very powerfully 2 weeks ago about the place of the wilderness in Jacob's encounter with the divine. That's where the ladder, the ramp descends. And it's a parallel moment here, just one that is a little more, that's a culminating moment and a turning point in Jacob's story. So that's the individual shadow, right? But we also have a communal shadow. There's like a political one, right? The social shadow of a society and the way it's organized. And I'd argue that much of post-war American life has been really intentionally designed such that we can stay in flight mode from our own wrongdoings and from our own failings. We have no need in modern America necessarily to confront our collective shadow. We can just escape it very, very easily. I think of Jane Jacobs in her book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, which asks us to consider the nature of things like the gated community or the suburb, or certain cities with very large streets and few public places, these hallmarks of post-war American urban design. Insulated in a car that carries you from garage to work to garage again, who can notice the communities paved over by the freeways you're driving on and which you commute every day? Our cities themselves can be set up in such a way that we have no need to confront our communal shadow. We can just let the garage door close behind us, and instead we're entirely in a word of our own control, and in a way a flight mode, right, can just stay in effect. This book by Immerwahr is very, very good, How to Hide an Empire, which is about U.S. empire and the mechanics it's taken. When imperial authority is exercised through the placement of military bases across the Pacific, right, where we have an enormous sphere of influence. Who can notice or who can talk about the fact that the United States has colonies or has an empire, right? They're set up in such a way that it's a compact of free association, not an imperial holding at all. And when those same Pacific nations where we have military bases and extend imperial reach, Kiribati and Micronesia, the Marshall Islands and Palau, are likely to be completely eliminated from rising sea levels during climate change. Who knows? Who sees that? Who hears that? And who is aware? Our world's set up, our nation's set up, and our society's set up to insulate us from our collective and individual failings. And as long as we can do this, as long as it's very, very easy to run, we have no need to confront, we have no need to fight, and we have no ability to find reconciliation. So it's really cool that the fight scene ends, the magical wrestling match ends with Jacob's name being changed and there being a fundamental transformation of his identity. Israel, who has striven with God and with men, has prevailed, and he's named not so much even by his victories, but by his struggles. Right, by his final refusal to keep running or distracting himself or escaping accountability. Now, at long last, with a trail of destruction and deception left behind him, he's become a different person. He's been renamed, and it's because the story of flight has ended and a confrontation has occurred at long last. It's much more positive going forward for Jacob, because the meeting with Esau is not a fight, it's a reconciliation. And it seems now that Jacob, having finally stopped running and confronting the hard things in his own life and what he's done, is capable of making peace. Esau, in the time we've been away from him, it seems, has lost his fight instinct, and Jacob, in turn, in finding his fight, has lost his flight. It's only from confronting this shadow, from seeing it face to face, that there's a possibility for reconciliation. Peace requires confronting that shadow, confronting the thing in the dark night of the soul in ourselves, in our cities and the way they're set up, in our country and in our world. So what do we need to do to stop running and to find the space to look our failures face to face?